What one thing you think improved your game the most?
One thing that improved my game the most, I would say just having. Stay tuned to find out what improved my game the most and my conversation with Dave in our new pool improvement podcast, Cue the Experts. Welcome to Cue the Experts, the pool improvement podcast where we dive deep into the minds of players and instructors who've dedicated themselves to mastering the sport. I'm Jeremiah Gage.
And I'm Dave Shelton.
And today we have, for our first episode, we wanted to do just between us two. And future episodes, we're going to have all kinds of guests to come on and really pick their brain on their expertise for teaching and also accomplished players. But a little bit about me, just to get started. I've been shooting pool since 2002, so over 23 years now. I have published a book called Bullseye Billiards, which is an awesome training aid for mostly practicing position pool. You can check that out at bullseyebilliards.com. And I also have been teaching for over 10 years, a part of the PBIA. And Dave and I actually have known each other since I used to live in Albuquerque. And he's been bugging me for a long time on starting a podcast because we were like, yeah, there really is nothing out there in podcast form about improving at pool and talking about instruction and just getting better. So that's led us to this format. So Dave, why don't you give a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, no, I'm excited about this. I think coming from 30 plus years in broadcast, when we met in Albuquerque in about somewhere between I think it was 2011 when I first moved there. I was there without my family. The iHeartMedia put me up in a hotel, and there was nothing really for me to do except go down to the pool hall that was right across the street. So that's where I met you, and you were well on your way in the technology department of developing scoring applications to run on your pad or iPad or tablet, and I was very impressed. And I think the league we were playing then was USAPL, and I hadn't done anything like that since APA back in Central Coast, California, or Tucson, Arizona, where I'm from originally. But it was obvious that you were very dedicated to the game. You were a very accomplished player even at that time, and hung out with some pretty good players in Albuquerque. And even you wanted the Albuquerque Billiard Club to be someplace that you opened up that was kind of a private club, but not really all that private. I think it was pretty easy to get into, but it made it a place where you had tables and people could come in, and it wasn't quite a bar atmosphere, and people could learn. And I was just really super impressed with that.
Speaking of the Albuquerque Billiard Club, which was also the Albuquerque Billiard Academy. Funny story about how that got started. We were in Vegas one year, me and my team, and we were sitting around having some drinks, and my English friend was like, man, I wish there was a real-size snooker table in Albuquerque. You can't find that anywhere, because a real-size snooker table is 12 feet, right? It's this gigantic thing. It's really, really difficult to play on, but they love it in England. I mean, it's treated almost like how golf is treated here. People watch it on TV. There's like millions of dollars in it. And so that's what he brought up on. And I was like, well, we could just rent a place and like put it in there, and then if we all chipped in for rent, then we'd have this like private place. And obviously around the table, people are like, yeah, that's a good idea. That's an awesome good idea. And then so I go home and I do a bunch of research, and I ended up signing a lease for a place, and I tell all my teammates, and they're all like, wait a minute, we weren't that serious about it, but okay, yeah, like let's go.
You owe me $100 a piece for rent for this month.
Yeah, pretty much. It wasn't actually even big enough for a full-size snooker table, but we did put an American size, a 10-foot size snooker table in there, and we had a 9-foot table and 2 smaller-sized bar tables in there.
No, it was fantastic, and there wasn't. I mean, at that time, there was only Doc and Eddie's Billiard Palace, I think it was called, and then the one out in Rio Rancho, Slate Street. So there's really only just a few. I mean, for a town of 850,000 people, that's probably pretty normal, I guess. I mean, there's been a couple that have closed down in Tucson, but Tucson's a little bigger than that. They really only have 2 since COVID. One of them doesn't even open up until 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I think here in Colorado, where you and I are, I'm in the Springs right now at my house in the back room, in the sunroom, and you up in Denver, There is a lot of pool in Colorado. And I think if anybody ever watches this and wanted to come and really get some good competition and experience some very good equipment, some really good halls, I think you would be very impressed to come to Colorado and hang out with us, you know. We hope that this will be fun and energetic and informational. I know I've learned a lot talking to probably the 10 or so different guests that we've had. We're going to put in for the first season. It's a lot about what they teach. Some of them are BPAA instructors, but I think in our second season, we'll delve more into maybe the mental side of pool. But maybe you can talk about your concepts for this show a little bit.
Yeah, the first season is really just some generic questions for a variety of people that we were able to get on the show. And some of the guests have taught literally thousands of students and even hundreds of instructors. So they know a lot, not just about pool, but also how to teach pool. And I'm hoping that in the future, we can go into depth on all kinds of topics that are really interesting to people. One in particular that I've been thinking about since my recent tournament history in Las Vegas and the national championships is concentration. So like, how do you bring out your top game when it's needed? How do you bring out your top game with like very little practice time or warm-up time or not knowing the equipment very well? And those are things that I'm starting to get to a point in my game that are really, really important, just going around to different events and not really being able to get super grooved in on equipment. And that makes a huge difference when you have these shots that are like so precise and you have to know, okay, the balls are actually sticking together a little bit more because it's slightly more humid, which was happened in Vegas. And that only matters on some angles and some speeds. So you have to be really aware of that, things like that.
Yeah, you've gotten yourself and your team to the finals table, and that's something that sits underneath the bright lights all day, and that felt is much drier, much faster, and it's a different thing to get used to because you don't get to practice on that table. So as you make your way through a tournament, you get to other tables that are in a different lighting and heat condition, and it does take a while to have to adapt your game to that for sure. So that would be a big and interesting item for us to go ahead and move forward with as we get into the second portion of our season here. Hopefully you get to know some of these guests. You've seen some of them online before, and you will welcome them back, because I think as you go through all these different concepts, Gage, that you'll be able to rely on some of these people to come back on the podcast too. So it's kind of a big family, and I'm just excited to be along the ride with you to help present it.
Yeah, and there's so many different perspectives as well. You have players that have really studied the game more in their own way, but then you've got instructors that have taken a look at a bunch of players and be like, okay, well, how do the pros or the best players in the world do it? Oh, but what works for amateurs, right? That might not actually be aligned all the time.
You have these handicap systems of APA and BCA and Fargo and stuff, and it's like, well, if I start playing and I'm playing in a league this week, what happens if I play in two leagues? I'll be on the table more. Well, we'll find out that your practice time needs to be purposeful in order to really get those gains. If you want to go from a 400 to a 500 Fargo, there's certain things that you can actually do that we can help point out on this show with the help of BPIA instructors and yourself and the teaching aids that we'll present, that you get to a certain level where you understand mentally more about the game, how important it is to play safe, where you want to take the risks of offense versus defense. I mean, there's so much to it that is just a big leap from every 100 Fargo that you go to. Now, I myself have been, mid 400s player, but I'm just absolutely excited. I've always loved this game. I actually started when I was about, I think 4 or 5 years old, at a place where it was dime tables. This was probably 1968. And it was actually on a ranch, which was a big clubhouse and a pool, that was a mob family in Tucson. And back then, all the mob families would vacation in Tucson. And my dad was a union steel worker, and we got invited out there all the time. And that was actually the first place I ever played pool.
Wow. What's in your path, your pool journey, what's the weirdest advice you've ever gotten?
I think one of the most interesting things is it was about aiming at that reflection of the lights on the ball, and then you'll be correct all the time. That was like, that is kind of funky. I don't know why anybody would ever really think that that works, but whatever. All different aspects and journeys in pool are there for different reasons. I mean, at some point you learn the game, at some point you want to compete at the game, and then at some point you realize you don't know anything about the game. And so it's a very humbling experience. And I think that's the part where I've been absolutely so humbled, getting my butt kicked by a one-legged guy in Pismo Beach. I mean, there's all sorts of different stories and stuff that we could go into once in a while, but you got a lot of respect for people like yourself that are very accomplished and know enough about it to where when you watch, it's easy to tell you know what you're doing, because everybody who's good at something makes it look easy and you know that it's not.
Yeah, that's what I try to bring to the table, is keep it simple as possible. I even had some people in Vegas say after the match, they're like, I learned something from your game. You know, all the shot selections were just so simple. You're not moving the cue ball more than you have to. And I'm like, yeah, because
I think that's so important.
I have that experience where I've moved the cue ball a little bit more than I had to, and I made a mistake. And at a certain level, if you make a mistake, that's your only chance, which makes it a really tough sport. It's really one of the only sports where you might not even get a chance.
I think it's one of the only sports where everybody, especially like a Moscone Cup and where they have all this big audience, I know of another sport where you're out there by yourself and people are that close to you because the playing surface is that small. It's not like tennis. I mean, maybe ping pong, but I mean, everybody is so close to you. It's a confined space. And so when you step out into that, I mean, it's not like stepping out on a football field where people are so far away. Yeah, you're under the bright lights and everything, and there's you and 21 other guys on the field. But in pool, man, it is like people are basically right on top of you watching, and that can be so intimidating.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. I came across this a number of times in competition where I'm at a table and I've got to wait for the player next to me, or there's other distractions, right? It could be there was a guy waving his arms in front of me the other day and I had to reset, or it could be something where they come over the announcements, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, okay. And it could be really, really challenging to try to keep this high level of concentration to be able to perform so precisely that you have to for most shots, that it just makes it an awesome sport on how challenging it is. And the fact that really good players make it look easy is almost detrimental to the spectator aspect if you're not in the sport, because it's like, oh, well, this is just an easy bar game, right? It's like, okay, well, why don't you play competitively and then see? And then once, a lot of the times when people really start to appreciate it, they get that bug, they get that itch. They're like, you know what? I want to watch and see how good players do it. I'm going to learn from that. And then hopefully a lot of our viewers on this will be like, yeah, I want all the information, you know, all the different techniques and advice to get better.
Yeah, I mean, when we started looking around, we started with the idea of this. We started looking around on the internet of what podcasts were out there, what people were doing. There's plenty of folks that are like, here's how to shoot this shot, you know, but it doesn't really go into what a practice routine would be like. I mean, some people have a little bit of that, but they're just videos that are on certain aspects of the sport. As far as learning, but none of them were a podcast where we can actually really dig in with some national guests and find out what drove them to get to where they are, whether it's professional play and then now they've kind of retired from it and they teach, or somebody who thought they were on an upswing of becoming a pro and then found out that I just don't have that kind of skill, but I do have a really good skill when I can teach people to play, and they became a BPIA instructor. I mean, everybody has a different road and a different journey. And there's an incredible vulnerability that I felt when I first got into my first tournament. I mean, I had wrestled in high school, but again, you're on a basketball court on a mat. People are 60 feet away. You know, you're half dressed or whatever, but there's a huge vulnerability that I'll never forget when I first walked out onto a mat and getting into a pool tournament. I didn't know anybody there. Nobody knew me. but I felt so vulnerable that everybody's watching every single shot I take. They're trying to investigate in my game what's going on in my mind. And it's just so much to think about and be distracted by. It takes training yourself in a certain way to go ahead and get to where you block all that out and you try to make that shot because you want to get on the next ball. But you feel vulnerable out there for sure.
Yeah, and when you start to really compete at the higher and higher levels, you start to realize that it's really all about your brain and your psychology, which then those principles of things that I'm really a proponent of, like meditation, apply not just in pool, but so many areas of your life. Things
Sure.
like preparation apply to all things in your life. So it's really not just this, oh, I'm getting better at pool and I'm competing at pool. It's like, no, actually, a lot of these skills apply to a bunch of different areas in life. So that's another reason that it's awesome.
So some of the questions that we asked our guests, we had come up with over time, and we thought they were pretty good. But one of the opening ones that Jeremiah always asked is, if pool tables could talk, what would your table say about your game today? And so after you've just come back from Vegas and been exposed to so much, one, what does it say? And two, was it different before you went to Vegas now versus what it would say?
I think before I went to the Nationals, it would probably say, "Oh, you're doing a little dance there, aren't you? I think those are some extra movements you don't need to be doing." And then afterwards, it's like, "Hey, it looks like you've really smoothed things out. You've got a way more defined routine now."
And that's really, really good. I think what my game would say about me has been there a lot. And it's like, you are way into consistent. You need to practice more so you can be more consistent at your game, because you've seen me pull off some pretty good stuff and you get to feel great about it. But it's like, well, can I do that twice? Maybe not.
Yeah, and consistency really is the name of the game. If you're able
Yeah.
to deliver that cue in a straight line consistently, then you can set it up however you want. But it's different vectors, right? You've got this vector for your aim, right? You've got this vector for your tip contact, and then you've got this vector for your stroke speed. So there's all these
Right.
different targets, if you will, that you have to all align for that one particular shot, and then keep doing that over and over again, in kind of like a game of chess where you have to think multiple moves ahead to really get the checkmate.
Yeah, that's true. So what do you think was the big spark for you to become an instructor?
Really, it was about just wanting to share knowledge. I never had an innate teaching want, I guess, in my life, but at some point, people kept asking me about lessons. And then one of my instructors was like, "Hey, you should become an instructor," and kind of nudged me toward it. And I'm really glad I did, because then it's been a great journey just creating content for players. And then I've been doing a little bit more one-on-one teaching lately. Teaching is really the last stage of learning. So if I'm going to be putting out, say, a book or a YouTube video or teaching people something, I'm like, well, I need to practice what I preach in a way. I need to actually put that in my own game. So it's really reinforced a lot of what I already know, but then I'm starting to actually practice more now. I'm like, okay, I'm going to wake up in the morning and do my 20 shots of I've got a whole list of shots that I've messed up, either positioning or whatever. And then I'm starting to hammer on those and then grooving in my routine. So it feels good to get back to doing that. I love it.
You think the game has changed a lot since '02 when you first got in? I mean, when I first started playing, it was like smoky, dark pool halls. You know, I would go in there, and it was again intimidating because I was young. After that, I think that the game has changed to be just such a huge recreational deal. I mean, women's pool got really, really big in the '90s. I was able to go to and meet Iwa Mataya and play a practice game with her and stuff like that. And I think it just sort of opened up my world to where what pro pool is, and they're just real good people. But for you, and maybe a little bit less distance of a journey from '02 to now, but how do you think that the game has changed?
So when I started in college, I was in the pool hall at the college. So there was no
Like a student
smoking
union?
or gambling. Yeah, the student union building. And the instructor, old guy, Ray Pravunis, great guy, one of my first instructors, he was kind of more of a purist. And so we were all into straight pool. We were all into writing down every shot, touch fouls, playing on big tables. We were very like gentleman sport like, like something in a country club, if you will. And so I didn't actually get exposed to more of the typical connotations of pool, of the gambling and the smoking, until I moved to Albuquerque in around '06. And then I saw that, yeah, pool halls are filled with smoke. There are people throwing money around. There was all this like, shit talking and barking at each other.
Very different energy than a union.
Yeah, and I was not having it. I was like I just practiced by myself for a while, and I was playing in some tournaments here and there. I didn't getting into the gambling. In fact, I've never really been into the gambling. I'm not really much of a gambler. And I have seen it change quite a bit though. They got rid of a lot of the smoking, which was good. And now there's a lot more streaming. And now even in Vegas, there's people wearing like all these jerseys, which I think look really cool. And it's treated more like a sport.
Yeah, I think professionally, what it looked like, watching the legends of the game versus watching, the pros that were a little more flashy and energetic in their play in the 90s as the older guys kind of retired, and you didn't see Minnesota Fats and Moscone and stuff after the 70s were over with. And then the 80s and 90s, nine ball really came in. I mean, it's amazing. Absolutely amazing how far this game has really come.
Yeah, going to one of the events at Nationals and seeing just seas of tables and all of these players that are just from all around the world doing all the same thing. We all have this one passion. I mean, you could be old or young, you could be rich or poor, but on the table equalizes everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say one of the biggest things that improved my game the most, and this is a question we ask all of our guests, I'll ask you too, is thinking defense first. I think that clearly, in meeting you and finding that that's something you have to keep in your mind. Yeah, you easily see, hey, I can make that ball, and then you have to study it and look what's going to happen next. But having a defense first, how can I go and stick this cue ball and make it to where it's difficult on the other player? Just to have that thought to be the first thought all the time, I think it's changed and elevated my game for sure. What one thing you think improved your game the most?
One thing that improved my game the most, I would say just having the passion for it. And really a lot of that came after reading The Pleasures of Small Motions by Bob Fancher, who really goes into the sports psychology of it. And I didn't really understand a lot of what he was saying until I read it like 3 or 4 times. But then I've really taken to heart studying things like rhythm and having a solid routine and just studying the sport and getting that feedback of like, okay, what do I need to work on? What's going to make the biggest impact on my game? And I've probably should have gone to maybe more instruction at certain periods of my time. I was relying more on my own self-analysis, but it's been a great journey. And I keep telling myself one day I'm going to stop changing my fundamentals so much. I think I'm getting there. I think I'm actually getting there.
Here's another question that I really like that we ask our guests. If you could play a match against anyone in history, living or deceased, who would it be?
If I would play a match against anyone, it would be Richard Feynman, who is, if you're not aware, he's a physicist, one of the most famous physicists, and he wrote a number of books that were just very entertaining. Richard Feynman's just been kind of a hero of mine, and it would be an honor to meet him. And he seems not only really smart, but really funny. And I think he would love pool just in the fact that it would be really challenging, and he would try to simplify it. I would love to get his take on what he thinks the game would be and just have some conversations with him.
I think for me, and there's a lot of really, really great, I'm a photographer, and there's a lot of great pictures of famous people playing pool, Hollywood people, the Rat Pack. But I'm old enough to remember the Jackie Gleason show, and I thought he was just one of the funniest people And I understood from my parents about how he started with the Honeymooners, and that was basically the basis for any sitcom that would ever come to television. And it was a huge undertaking to go from vaudeville to do situation comedy. But he was so entertaining. And then I found out later that there was this movie that had been done a long time ago with him and Newman called The Hustler. And I had no idea that he was such a good pool player or an accomplished player. I think it would be absolutely enjoyable, just laugh out loud, great time to play some pool with Jackie Gleason. I think that would it would be an exciting, fun time. I think it would be really cool. So would you rather play the worst pool of your life and win, or play the best pool of your life and lose?
All right, so this is really an interesting question. It kind of depends. If I'm playing in a tournament, I'm there to win. Even if I play really bad, I would prefer to get the win because, well, I won, and there's probably some title or money on the line. But
Right.
then usually I get to keep playing. So then that just means I get to keep playing more. And usually when I play really bad, I'll learn a lot. So it's not the worst thing in the world. But then if I play really good and lose, well, it's like, well, maybe I went hill with Shane Van Boning
Yeah, right.
in the first round of the U.S. Open or whatever. I'm like, well, I played awesome.
I think I'd like to know what it's like to play the absolute best that I could play through a race, through a tournament, even if I got to Hill and lost it at the end on something fluky or whatever. I think that would be better than playing terrible pool and actually winning. Because then, was it like, hey, I won? Yeah, we saw that. You lucked in 10 shots or whatever. You know. So, do you like leagues or tournaments?
I think that would be tournaments because leagues for me are more social, which is fine.
Yeah.
But it's just centered around pool and it's more of a loose environment. It's not generally super competitive where if I'm really trying to show what I've got and just see, the whole competition of it, I like tournaments.
Yeah, I haven't done very many. I'd have to select leagues because, and playing on your team, it's the dynamic of having 4 or 5 people together that really get along, that enjoy playing, and the camaraderie and accomplishing something together, I think is really, really cool. But as I get a little bit more accomplished, I think I'm going to like the competition of tournaments. A little bit too old at 61 to be racing motocross anymore. This is the only thing that really gets my heart up anymore. My heart gets racing under the pressure of making a shot or not, especially when you get there close to the win. It's not obviously the same, physical conditioning kind of thing as racing dirt bikes, but it does get your heart rate up. And that was that was an interesting part of pool that I never really realized until I started playing in tournaments or started playing against much better people.
Yeah, tournaments can really add the pressure. And you mentioned it, the team tournaments are the most pressure.
Yeah.
Because if you're playing in a singles tournament, okay, it's all on you, right? If you win
Sure.
or lose. But in a team, your teammates are relying on you. Everyone's watching. There's way more pressure in that, which if you can manage that, is generally really good for your game. It allows you to just really dive in and concentrate on what is it going to take to win this game. Things that you might not have thought about before start coming to your mind, like defense you had mentioned. And for me, it was really thinking ahead, like, what if I end up a little short here, a little long there? All these things that I probably normally wouldn't think about in a singles match for various reasons. But when it comes to just having to step up and win that one game, typically in a team environment, then wow, there's nothing else like it, I found.
Yeah, team environment is great. Being a football player, there's nothing like it when you have all 11 guys doing the right thing at the right time and you get a huge result out of it. But individual sports are definitely something that as a team aspect growing up playing, whether it's football or soccer or baseball or whatever, you have a reliance on everybody else. And when you get to an individual sport, be it wrestling or motocross or billiards, you have to rely on yourself. Then you can't just ask somebody else about something. You're tied in. There's a time limit. You got to go. That aspect of being able not only to be self-reliant, but when you accomplish something, that's all on you. And so I think that's a huge part about it. And I hope we can bring that out in this podcast to let people know that there are ways to get better, and it can be a lot more rapid than you think, depending on the purposeful practice you put in, whether it be bullseye billiards or watching any other kind of instructional videos, or listening to some of the BPA instructors that we have on, or some of the pros that we'll talk to about their journey. It should be a lot of fun here in the podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's really the whole point of this, is to pick people's brains. And so even though we've already recorded the first season, if you have any questions or even people you'd want to see, make sure to put a comment.
That's a great idea. Absolutely.
And,
yeah.
We'll see what we can do in future seasons, and any topics that you want to dive into, let's go. We're all about improving and improving efficiently. There's this thing of like, you only have so much time you're willing to dedicate, right? And if you don't have a table at your house, like, how much time can you really practice when you have to go out? It's kind of this constraint that you have to deal with. So how do you get the most out of your time?
Yeah, being efficient. Yeah, absolutely. I think people will learn that from the folks that we've interviewed. I think everybody has their own slant on how they got better, how they can practice efficiently. And I think there's a lot to learn here on the podcast that will show that. So I hope we've done a good job of letting you know who we are. And I go by Digital Dave because it was a name that was given to me when I worked in Los Angeles and rock radio. But hopefully myself and Jeremiah can pique your interest in how to get better at pool, which is something no other podcast in the world is going to go ahead and concentrate on. So I think we have a good niche market, and everybody who looks at something online about pool, there's a little bit of them that obviously they want to get better. So I think we can help with that.
Absolutely, Dave. Yeah. Thanks for helping me put this all together. For our viewers, make sure to like, subscribe, and share the podcast.
Hopefully in a few days, we'll have our first guest to go ahead and have you notice this. I think that the idea is to have this out and then have our first regular one on pretty soon. So stay tuned.